Hi, and welcome to another episode of the World Recreational Fisheries Conference interview series, recorded live at WRFC 2026. Right now, I'm joined by Professor Stephen Cooke, a legend in the field of recreational fisheries, also a professor at Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. You're an integrative biologist, a conservation scientist, an internationally recognized leader in the recreational fisheries research field, and you've joined us in Mbokweni in the Eastern Cape for WRFC 2026. Your keynote presentation, Pessimism and Optimism for the Future of Recreational Fishing Through the Lens of a Scholar, Practitioner, and Angler. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a bunch for the invite. Great to be here.
What's your experience of the Eastern Cape been?
Oh, love being here. Yeah, I always like to experience new places, new peoples. And this one's special because it's our community coming together. You know, we're spread across the world. Every 3 years we have these conferences, and I've been fortunate to go to most of them since I was a student. So it's just a base to keep reconnecting with people, learning and sharing.
It feels silly to ask you to briefly introduce yourself and give an overview of several decades of experience, but please could you briefly tell us who is Stephen Cooke and what brings you to this conference?
Yeah, I'm a father of 3 kids. I'm an avid multi-species angler. I don't have any particular preference. I just like to spend time in the water. I don't really care if I catch anything. For me, it's more about just cleansing the mind and spending time with friends and family. My day job as a professor, I spend some time in the classroom, but I spend much more time in the outdoors. That sort of is my classroom, doing research, working with and mentoring grad students. Much of our work is in the rec fisheries space or on rec fisheries relevant species. And it really crosses the boundaries between the natural sciences and the social sciences with a focus on solutions. That's key too. It's easy to point out problems, but it's much harder to solve things. So that's the space we try to work in.
You're not the first person I've spoken to this week who has said that it's not about catching the fish, it's about the process.
Yes.
And I think that's very significant. Tell me, what is your process?
Yeah, so I'm an avid tackle collector. We've heard some talks this week that have sort of, mused about whether rec fishing is, fishing itself or the catch is addictive. For me, it's probably the tackle purchasing is where the real addiction is. I love preparing and, thinking about, what I need with me and, of the, 10 gazillion, options, you can put on the end of your line every time you go out, what I'm going to bring with me, what I'm going to tie on, where in a water body I'm going to fish, who I'm going to invite to go with me. I love that stuff too. And then being on the water, again, if you catch a fish, that's bonus, but it's about being outside. And I notice, I can feel it when I miss that time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Your keynote framed the future through both pessimism and optimism. Why is it so important to hold both perspectives?
Yeah. They really complement each other. And these days, I don't know, if you open a newspaper, there's lots of things that that sort of have me in that pessimistic space. Certainly interesting times. And I think that's probably what prompted me to think about rec fisheries in this way. But that said, there's always been sort of these opportunities and challenges would be another way of framing it. I like pessimism because it forces us to sort of think critically about something and, what's the basis for this issue? Is this something we're ever going to overcome? There's some big challenges out there. So framing things that way sometimes just makes them easier to deal with. But at the same time, it's nice to be optimistic and have that sort of that hope. And they balance each other nicely in the sense that you don't want to be, overly optimistic is problematic, just like, oh, we'll fix it. Just trust us. Give me a month. And I'll some of these challenges are really, really difficult. At the same time, throwing your hands up in the air and saying, we might as well give up. This is impossible. That's not helpful either. So there's this tension between the two, I think, and you kind of lean, you have good days, you have good hours, and you have challenging days and challenging hours. And they really complement each other nicely.
What's one uncomfortable truth about recreational fisheries that we don't talk about enough?
Yeah. The conflict within. It's easy to think about conflict and rec fisheries and point to, say, for example, the conflict between the commercial sector and the recreational sector. The more and more I work with recreational fishers of all stripes and sorts, you see how different they are because they are fishing for different reasons. They have different lived experiences, different values. And so, somebody that's a specialized angler after a single species. They only use a single gear type. They release everything they catch, and it's that organism defines them in many ways. And then you have others that really need fish for food, and so yes, they buy a fishing license and they have fun while doing it. But at the end of the day, they really need that fish to supplement their nutritional security, and so those are very different needs. Those are different, and underpinning that is oftentimes the different levels of wealth, different levels of education. And so there's some systemic issues there that contribute to that conflict. And I think to me, though, that's also the opportunity, right? The opportunity is to, okay, how do we manage fisheries for all, not just, those that happen to be represented by a well-funded fishing organization, but really we're managing for all. That's the challenge. And I think we're now talking about these things openly. We're starting to recognize it's not that these fishers, for example, the, low income urban fishers or rural fishers, they've always been there. We just have ignored them. And so now through research, a lot of really good social science studies, we're trying to give them voice and learn about their needs and make sure that they're considered in the management space.
If we look forward, say 20 years from now, what will determine whether or not recreational fisheries is thriving or, I guess, in serious trouble?
Yeah. A couple things. One, I'll just quickly cover climate change. We can't assume that it's going to just look after itself, that everything will sort itself out. We need to be proactive and really come up with some plans. And now's the time to be doing that, so we don't have to be reactive. Yeah, so that's certainly a big part of it. Another is the so-called social license or social acceptability of fishing. And that's something that I'm always worried about is we have more and more people living in urban centers, becoming disconnected with nature. All of a sudden, this idea that, they're just, they're just playing with fish, and so I think anglers need to recognize how precarious that social license is, how quickly it can be lost, and work towards securing that license. And that means really thinking about how to be responsible, how to think beyond doing things that support the aquatic ecosystem and other aquatic users and biodiversity, not just things that are self-serving to rec fishing. And there's lots of ways that one can do that. Doing habitat work and creating a fish attractor. That's in quotes habitat, but that's very different than, hey, we're going to plant trees in an upland area that's going to improve water quality, benefit riparian wildlife, benefit the other people that swim and drink and recreate in and around or live in and around that water. So I think just being a little less targeted with the kind of work that those groups are doing. And I think the other thing is we got to activate and mobilize the masses. When we talk about people that are parts of clubs or that are interested in the science that we're doing or that are going to write a letter to a management agency, we're talking about 2%, 5%, maybe 10% of the population of fishers. And when we think about the fact that there's 220 million plus recreational fishers out there, we're really only working. Yeah. So how do we truly engage the masses in behaviors, whether it be responsible fish handling, whether it be understanding the basis for regulations and why compliance is necessary, helping others get introduced into the sport. There's lots of things that we can do, and it can't just be left to a small percentage. We need to mobilize the masses so that we've got, can you imagine the good that we could do for aquatic conservation and yes, it would make fishing better, but that's not, that's just a side benefit in many ways.
You mentioned climate change and then these cumulative stresses that are intensifying. How resilient are these systems, are recreational fisheries systems, and where are we the most vulnerable?
Yeah.
How much further can we push it?
Yeah. And so let's just make sure our listeners understand that when you say systems, and you're including the anglers in there, right? It's not just the ecosystem minus people. We are part
We
of
are.
that. And so I think the precarity there for fishers is that, the opportunity to fish could evaporate
Yeah.
if these cumulative stresses stack up to the point where we've got to remove all of those pressures. Wreck fishing might not have been the driver, but it's yet another pressure on top of, water pollution, invasive species, climate change, and so on. So, so anything that we can do as a community to try and address that, and no one individual is going to stop or reverse climate change. I get that, but it's the perfect time to double down on things that we do have control over, that are up to our individual choices as consumers. What do we buy? Who do we vote for? Where do we donate our money? How do we invest our free time when we're volunteering? How do we interact individually with a fish? If we're going to release it, we should probably release it in a way that it can survive, so that, and a variety of reasons for that, so that it can reproduce, benefits the ecosystem, benefits others, and it benefits themselves. The fish is out there to be caught again or to make more fish. So, yeah.
On an optimistic note,
Yes.
what gives you confidence for the future?
Yeah, the next generation. So, and this is something that I muse about quite a bit. You look at all the environmental and social problems out there, and, I've been working on this for 20 years, and I hope I got another 20 years in me. But in many ways, my generation has failed. We haven't addressed the biodiversity crisis. We got the climate crisis. We've got all sorts of geopolitical strife. So, it's a burden that we're going to throw on the next generation. And what's fantastic is around 30% of the attendees at this conference were considered early career researchers or professionals. And so we're preparing that next generation for the hard work that sadly they're going to really have to do. So we'll do as much as we can, but making sure that the next generation's ready. And that extends to anglers as well. It's recruiting new anglers. And as somebody that, sometimes I'm described as a conservation scientist. Some people are like, oh, well, why would you like it when people fish? When people, as a conservationist, shouldn't you be against that kind of thing? It's like, no, I want people to be advocates, responsible for nature. And we do that through connection. If everybody's just stuck behind their handheld device, or, stuck in an urban environment surrounded by glass and concrete, that disconnection becomes problematic. And anglers are the eyes and ears of our natural resource management agencies. They're the ones that are going to hold governments to account and say, hey, this matters to me. I want to see proper investments, and, I don't want to see that development occur, or I want it to make sure that development occurs in a way that is compatible with. So, yeah, so more people fishing, more young people fishing, and really working from the beginning to move beyond the fact that it's, just an extractive activity and just a leisure activity. It's much more. And there's, again, that responsibility to give back.
You said you've got another 20 years in you.
Hopefully more.
Hopefully more, 30, 40. If you look back at your career one day, what is the one change you would have hoped that you would have made?
Oh boy, in the wreck fishing space, I
in addition, I have to add, in
Yeah.
addition to the magnificent knowledge you've already parted.
Well, yeah, the one problem with just generating knowledge and shoving things in a library is that it's only useful if somebody reads it or it gets used. I'm certainly proud of the work we've done to mobilize that knowledge and support decision makers to co-produce knowledge, which we know is a pathway to generating knowledge that's more likely to be used. I think one thing we collectively, and I'm part of that, have failed to do yet, and we must do, is that, mobilizing and activating the masses, because we need them, and we need them now. And it's not just anglers. When we think about these issues, I spend more time in the freshwater system. We got a massive freshwater biodiversity crisis, and it's an all hands on deck, approach that's needed. And anglers are a big part of that equation. So that's something that really need to make happen.
What can people listening to this conversation, or having attended the conference, or just in general, what's the one thing that everyone can do differently to make sure that the future is a little bit more proved?
Yeah. So first of all, just take a minute and reflect on why you fish and why you value your time outdoors, why you value your interactions with nature, and how what it would mean to you if that was gone. If it was gone because it was unsafe to use. And we've been there before, right? Rivers burned
Yeah.
in the past, contaminants, if again, fisheries have to be closed because it's the only option left to us. And I don't think that's the world that any of us want to live in. So what can we collectively do to prevent that from happening? And I think we all start with our, what we can control, which is our own behaviors, and then share, talk to your neighbor, talk to your kids, talk to your politicians, step up and be a leader, step up and volunteer. Again, it goes back to individuals and, wreck fishing. When you think about it, it's often it can be distilled down to the interaction between an angler and a fish. That's kind of, it's a one-on-one thing, and those things scale up, right? There's lots of anglers and there's lots of fish, and fish are part of population, so these things connect. But it really, I think, helps to demonstrate the power of an individual angler because there are so many of us. So doing something, and as long as we all do something, that's potential for big effort, big change.
Professor Cooke, I'm going to let you go and have your run now, but thank you so much for joining us in the Eastern Cape and for really being a game changer in the space. So really, thank you.
Thanks so much for hosting us.